Swing and a miss. Struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
And the Sixers win it! Wow!
Oh man, Embiid just posterized Russell Westbrook.
You love the Philadelphia Eagles! Let me get a hell yeah!
Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome to another edition of Party on Broad. Our Sixers draft continues, and I've got a special guest joining me tonight to break down his top 30 prospects for the 2021 NBA draft, which is just days away. Before we get started, guys, always please be sure to like, comment, subscribe here. If you're watching us live, comment in that comment section and react to Mark's picks. We're going to have a lot of fun here. It's almost Christmas Day. Joining us today, of course, is Mark of the Tough Cover podcast. He does an amazing job breaking down the best top sports betting in pretty much all sports. So make sure you follow him on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. _ Follow the Tough Cover podcast on Twitter. What's up, Mark?
Nothing much, man. It feels like this draft snuck up on me. Like most of the time, it feels like I'm waiting for it. Maybe that's just the nature of where we're at as Sixers fans a little bit. But it really felt like it snuck up on me. But in the last couple days, I've really started to get in the swing of things. It's really draft season officially for me this week. All the rumors. We got a big trade today already that changed up the board. So we're really in the swing of things. I'm excited to do my final top 30 big board. This isn't a Sixers big board. This is just overall. But when we get to the players that Dibes has covered, which is about 80% of the NBA draft so far, if you look at the painted lines, Dibes and Tiago have done a great job breaking down a lot of the guys from a Sixers standpoint. So when we get to those guys, we're going to break it down from a bit of a Sixers standpoint. But this is just mine in a vacuum overall. Obviously, each team has different needs, different fits. But this is my personal top 30 big board.
And I've been making highlight reels of all these guys for a long time now, for months. So we're going to kind of maybe like once in a while we'll take a break, watch a segment of a highlight reel and just react. And if it's Sixer related, if you guys are watching in the comment section, be like, hey, let's watch this for a second. Totally cool. So Mark, lead us off, man. Let's start number one.
Yeah, for sure. And if I'm going to try to not get bogged down in each player. I'm sure I could go on and on about some of these guys, but I'm going to try to give some cliff notes, talk about the guys that I like more than consensus and the guys that I like less than consensus. I'll kind of note why and my concerns with guys or why I love certain guys. But if you guys want to hear anything more about certain prospects or if you guys have any disagreements or agreements with my list, leave it in the comments and I'll be happy to elaborate or go into anything. You'll hear me reference stats throughout. Most of these or all of these are per 40. When I just tried to compare everybody, I think per 40 is the best way to do that. So a lot of the times you'll hear me reference that. And when you hear me reference draft range, that's actually because we have a guy at the Painted Lines here, Joey, who has put together an awesome tool for us to use where he tracks the big mock drafts. So when I talk about draft range, I'm using really the top 6 or 7 mock drafts out there to try to give you an idea of where they're projected to go in the draft in relation to where I have them ranked. So number one, no surprise here, is a guy that if you were following the Tough Cover podcast, I was betting on quite often with Oklahoma State, Cade Cunningham. I've heard a lot of people like Chad Ford and other draft experts kind of be like, yeah, I mean, this is a really good draft at the top, but number one, we don't have a LeBron type prospect, or we don't have a Dwight Howard type prospect or Anthony Davis. And I want to push back on that because I'm not saying he's LeBron James. I'm not saying he's anything like that. But I think he really has the makings to become a low-key Luka Doncic. I don't know if he's quite as flashy a passer as Luka Doncic or if he's quite as good at getting to the rim, but I really think he has the upside of becoming a Luka Doncic level player and being good right away. When you saw what he did for a team like Oklahoma State, who was terrible around him, that team wouldn't have made the NIT without him. They ended up being a 3 seed in the tournament, I believe, and could have been higher, and they got a bad draw. But Cade Cunningham, you saw it in big moments against the best teams, against Baylor, who he beat on the road. You saw it against the biggest teams, the best defenders. He went off, and in the biggest moments, he looked like the best guy on the court every single time, and I have no doubts that he's going to advance. It looks like Detroit's going to be making the right pick at number one. There's some murmurs that they could trade down. But Cade Cunningham is my number one. So let's get to number two. And by the way, I think Cade Cunningham's in a tier of his own. That's tier one. So let's get to tier two. Number 2, 3, 4. I think these guys are really close, so I'm going to kind of talk about them together. Evan Mobley at number 2, Jalen Green at number 3, and Jalen Suggs at number 4. It looks like Green's going to go 2 to Houston. It looks like Mobley's going to go 3 to Cleveland. It looks like Suggs is going to go 4 to Toronto. In my opinion, Houston should take Evan Mobley. I think Evan Mobley is the most sure thing of these 3 guys personally. I understand the upside with Jalen Green. I do think that you look at him and you could squint and see a Bradley Beal type player down the line. And that is something, a lot of people seem to think you need that top perimeter player to win a title. I mean, take a look at the Milwaukee Bucks. They didn't necessarily have that, so I want to push back against that a little bit. But I think that you should take the best player available, especially Houston and Cleveland. There's talk. Do you try to take the player that fits with your current team? You're rebuilding. I think you try to take the best player available. To me, that's Evan Mobley, but it's only by a hair. I think Evan Mobley, very Chris Bosh, Paul Gasol level player. He didn't shoot it a lot in college from 3, but I think he absolutely has the ability to. I'm not someone who says all the time that I believe in the shot when you haven't seen enough of it, but I believe in the shot with Evan Mobley. They just didn't have to ask him to do it because he played the 5 almost primarily. I think he could play some 4 in the NBA. Jalen Green's a 2. Jalen Suggs is the last guy, number 4. He hit one of the biggest shots in the tournament in the last recent memory to send Gonzaga to keep him moving against UCLA. He's a gamer. He's the type of guy that's going to fit right into Toronto. He's never going to play on a bad NBA team probably because they're going to be good again next year. He's just a guy. He's not in terms of same type of player, but very Halliburton-esque. I think he's going to be someone who just steps in right away, and it's like, oh, why didn't this guy go higher? But he's going to go probably where he's supposed to go at 4. But 20 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, 6.5 per 40, and only 4 turnovers. Good defender, probably the best on-ball defender in the draft class. There's some doubts about his 3-point shot, so that's probably if he was, a 36+% 3-point shooter on volume attempts, he would probably be in the mix for the number 1 pick. But instead, he also, you're going to hear this a lot in the draft, he was like a 5-star quarterback prospect in the NFL. So that's something cool about Jalen Suggs. But moving on to the next tier, so that's consensus. Everyone has those guys in the top 4. Moving on, this is where my list starts to get crazy and really differ from a lot of the people out there. At number 5, I have Jalen Johnson. So this is a guy I've tweeted about incessantly recently. So this is a guy I want to highlight a little bit. I think I see a lot of Jason Tatum in this guy's game. He really, I know that it's an easy thing because they both went to Duke. They're both combo forwards. But if you look at their comparisons per 40 from when they were in college, they're strikingly similar. Jalen Johnson was 21 points per game, 11 rebounds per game, 4 assists per game, 2.2 steals per game, and 2.3 blocks per game per 40, while Tatum was 20 points per game, 9 rebounds per game, 2.6 assists per game, 1.6 steals, and 1.4 blocks. So Jalen Johnson was better in a lot of ways. Tatum got to the line more, shot more threes. But obviously there's some doubts about Jalen Johnson's character. He left Duke early, so that's something that has him falling. I think he's a guy who should go number 5 personally. But he's going to be a steal wherever he goes in the fringe lottery or right after the lottery. And then number 6, I have Davion Mitchell, which there's a couple guys. The next 2 guys I'm going to talk about go against everything I believe in terms of. So this is a comment. Sees more Aaron Gordon than Tatum with Jalen Johnson. I understand that. I could see that. But I think Jalen Johnson's shot, he didn't shoot it a lot, but he did shoot it 44% from 3, just on super limited attempts. I believe in his jumper a bit more than I would believe in Aaron Gordon. So Tatum might be, while that might be the high ceiling floor, I could see Gordon being more of a floor. And I could see, even Tobias Harris type player, Harrison Barnes type player, as a middle type case for Jalen Johnson personally. But Davion Mitchell is a guy at number 6 who I think can step in right away. He's a champion with Baylor. He's 6'2". He's older, so that's 2 things that I generally wouldn't like. Not a high recruit, I don't believe, coming into college. Those are all things that scare me. But when you watch the guy, he's just such a gamer. He 17 points per game, which is a little lower than some of these guys per 40. But 7 assists per game on only 3 turnovers, while he's one of the best defenders in college basketball. And he turned himself. A lot of these older guys, they get knocked, but he turned himself in to what he needed to be a higher draft prospect. He made himself a legitimate volume 3-point shooter, and that's huge for Davion Mitchell. And if that 3-point shot's legitimate, then he is every bit of a top 6 pick in this draft. I think he'd be a great fit for Golden State at 7. So then that finishes that little tier of 2 guys, and then the next tier, I think Cam Thomas at 7, and I'm wearing LSU here, so this might be a little bit ridiculous, but this is the first guy that Dibes did a Sixers breakdown for, so you want to take it over here a little bit, Dibes?
No, I mean, I can touch on it quickly. I mean, scoring. You know, this guy's offensive potential is through the roof. I think this is a little high for Cam Thomas personally. I have him. He's definitely very high on my Sixers big board for number 28. But when you talk about Cam Thomas, you talk about a walking bucket. You talk about his pull-up game, almost reminiscent of like Trey Mann. No one on the Sixers has a pull-up game like a guy like Cam Thomas or Trey Mann. Like you see that step back, it is just absolutely delightful to watch. You know, this guy, I think, also generates a lot of free throws. Something the Sixers could use more of. But you look at the offensive arsenal, he can get to the rim. He's a 3-level scorer. He can pull up, post up, draw fouls. Just one of the most pure scorers in this entire draft. The only downside is he's 19 years old. Will the Sixers draft? They did with Tyrese Maxey. Who is making that draft pick? Is it Doc Rivers or is it Daryl Morey? You know, we're going to know a lot if the Sixers actually make this pick for themselves at number 28. But if he's there, he's absolutely among the top of the top for the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah, this is a guy that I have higher than anyone I've seen personally in the draft industry. KOC for the Ringer has him number 9 overall. That's the highest I've seen him. His draft range, from what I've seen, is really he has one of the larger draft ranges out there. It's anywhere from 13 to 27. So that I've seen him honestly mocked to the Sixers earlier on in the process. It seems he's risen a little bit. I've heard teams like Indiana absolutely love him in the late lottery. But the reason I love him and the reason I think he's going to be good right away as a 19-year-old in the NBA is his scoring is so translatable. I don't think he doesn't rely on athleticism that's going to drop off at the next level. He is just, like you said, a walking bucket. He just can do it in every which way. That step back is one of the nastiest moves I've ever seen on a college basketball player. And I'm just so sure that he's going to step up and be a good shooter at the next level. He shot it how many times per game from 3? It wasn't that he shot it 32%, but he shot the ball 8.5 times per game from 3 per 40, which was one of the highest in the class. But you look at points per game per 40, he's at 27 points per game per 40. The next guy in my top 30 is Kispert at 23.5. That's a big drop off in terms of who the best scorer in the class is. And then you mentioned it. The biggest thing with him, 9 free throws attempted per 40. That is unbelievable efficiency. And if you inject that into this Sixers offense, just the ability to get to the line, I think he is the perfect sixth man for this team and for any team out there. I think he's the type of guy who can fit in anywhere. Yeah, reminds you a bit of Clarkson, but if you replace some athleticism with more finesse, that makes a ton of sense. I have 4 players that remind. I couldn't narrow it down because I see so many guys in him. I have DeRozan in the way he's so crafty in getting to the lane. Not a similar play style because DeRozan's 6'7". Cam Thomas is undersized at 6'4", but just the way he's able to get to the lane and get to the line, I think I see a lot of DeRozan in him. I see a lot of Sexton in him and his FU attitude and just getting to the hole and beating you off the dribble, even without extreme athleticism. And then I think the most realistic comp that I see is Karis LeVert. I think Karis LeVert is someone he could turn into pretty easily with probably shooting a bit more threes than Karis does. But he's obviously a guy that is probably my guy in this draft class. He's my number 1 Sixers hope. So he's a guy that I absolutely love at number 7 overall, Cam Thomas.
Real quick. What I love about him is just he's fearless offensively. Like you look at the Sixers in the playoffs, near dead last in 3-point attempts. You look at the Sixers offense, it just stalled. You put this guy on the court, you know what you're going to get. You know, like I see this guy easily like a 10 to 15 minute kind of guy next year that is going to know his role, and his role is to put pressure on a defense. And you look at Tyrese Maxey and how he excelled with that. I like this guy a lot. I really do.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think Cam Thomas is a sure thing to be able to score at the next level. Obviously, there's not much else to talk about positively about his game, but I think when you have that ability to score, you'll see it a lot in my rankings. I'm valuing guys that have one skill that is so elite because I think that translates at the next level, even if there's worries about the other things. I think I messed up. I'm sorry.
Wouldn't it be ironic if we trade Ben Simmons on draft night and bring in a guy like Cam Thomas from LSU?
It's went so well before. How could you not do it again? All right. So next up at number 8 is a guy, Moses Moody. From Arkansas, a guy I like a lot, 6'6", probably small forward, maybe a shooting guard. He's got a 7'1" wingspan. He only had 1.2 steals, but he actually had 0.8 blocks per game. So a really versatile defender, a guy that I really like defensively more than I feel like he's getting credit for out there in terms of draft circles. But the thing that's worrisome about Moses Moody, and if you look at his numbers, you look at some of his ability offensively, he's a guy that probably should be in that top 6 maybe, but you could watch a lot of Arkansas games this year and kind of forget he's out there. And he's a little too passive for me, which is kind of a worry when your main thing about you is being a 3-level scorer. But when he's on, it's like, wow, this guy should be a top 5 pick. But Arkansas, really, he kind of was like a role player for them last year. It was a bit of where he's going in the draft. You'd assume these guys were all the number 1 guy on their team and they were the main scoring focus. But there were games where he wasn't getting that many shots. And I don't know if that's just a system thing. I know Eric Musselman has a different system at Arkansas, but I think that maybe that's something you can kind of coach him into shooting more at the next level. But I think that he could be injected with some irrational confidence, and that would help him out a lot. But he definitely has some worrisome traits about being too passive. But I like him enough to rank him at number 8. His draft range is anywhere from 7 to 16. I think an NBA comp that makes a ton of sense for him is another guy who does the same kind of thing. Bogdan Bogdanovic is a guy who I think has a ton of skills from a scoring perspective. But there's a lot of games, and we saw it even in our series. There are some games where he shows up and wins them the game almost. And then there's games where it's like, wait, is Bogdan Bogdanovic played 25 minutes? You didn't really notice. So I think that he's someone who that makes a lot of sense. That's not a comp I've seen anywhere, but I think that those two players could be very similar. So then moving on to the next guy at number 9, James Bouknight. I actually compared him to a guy that was mentioned earlier in the comments, Jordan Clarkson. I think James Bouknight has a lot of Jordan Clarkson in his game. He's been a fast riser in this draft class. I think it's probably been the highest riser. He's going to go anywhere from 6 to 12, but it looks like he's probably going to go in the top 10. And he's a guy that you could see when he was missing for UConn last year that they missed him dearly. He was out for a couple of games and they were like one of the worst teams in college basketball without him. He was not very efficient. He's tagged as being an awesome playmaker, but he really turned it over more than he had 3 turnovers per 40 to 2 assists per 40, which is terrible ratio. So that's a little bit worrisome with a guy who you're hoping to be a creator as a 2 guard. I am a little bit nervous that, does he fall into being a bit of a Gary Harris where he's a jack of a couple trades and not a playmaker for others. And that doesn't leave you with very high upside, but he did average 21.5 per 40 and he gets to the line at will, 6.8 free throws attempted per 40. And he is willing to shoot threes, even if he's not that efficient from there. So that is a trait that he could improve on. So then number 10 and number 11, I'm going to do these two back to back because I don't know. They're such different players. I don't know who to put ahead of who. I asked it in our one chat. I have Jonathan Kuminga out of the G League at number 10, and I have Corey Kispert out of Gonzaga at number 11. They are such different players because Kispert's obviously an older player, went to college for Gonzaga. Kuminga's obviously a younger guy who has such high upside. From the G League, Kuminga's going to be a guy that probably goes top 6. I have a lot of worries about Kuminga. I don't necessarily know what he does excellently. He seems like a good rebounder. I don't know if he's going to be a great rebounder at the next level. He shoots a lot of threes. He doesn't do it very efficiently. He doesn't get to the line all that much. He's very athletic. I know some people have compared him to Tracy McGrady, Paul George. I've seen some crazy comparisons. And I just don't necessarily see it, but I do understand. You look at the frame, you look at the athletic profile, you look at some of the highlights. that, some of them will make your jaw drop. He's definitely a fun, tantalizing player. So I see the upside a bit more than another guy who's slated to go high later that I'll talk about later on. So for number 5, there's 2 players that Orlando is going to be looking at. I understand them picking Kuminga. I wouldn't understand them taking another guy that I'm going to talk about at number 15. And Corey Kispert, such a different player, kind of a sure thing. We know what Corey Kispert's going to be. Is it worth taking? Yeah, exactly. He's just a shooter. He's just a 3-point shooter. He's a bit of a Joe Harris type. A bit of a Bojan Bogdanovic type, maybe, if you're hoping he can create a bit for others or be even a little more high level of a scorer than Joe Harris. But he's a pretty sure thing. You know what you're going to get. The upside may not be that high. You may have some doubts about him lateral quickness-wise defensively. But I think he's a pretty safe bet to go late lottery and not disappoint you too much.
Can we go to some comments?
Yeah.
From this comment, NBA is not basketball. The world is no longer disabled. The NBA also needs abilities like movement, defense, and delivery, not just dunks and threes. There are a lot of players in Europe who are at the NBA level. If the U.S. underestimates the international teams, it will fly fast from the Olympics. So any take on that? I think the NBA has slowly evolved into more of a European game, for a while now.
Yeah, for sure. I think that you look at how high European guys go. You look at a guy that I'm not going to talk about. I'll just get in front of it. Alperen Sengun. I'm not very high on him. I don't see him as a first-round pick. He might go top 10. He might go top 8. So I think that just shows that the NBA does value the European game.
Are there more players other than 60? No, I think she's talking about the NBA, the first 2 rounds. So it's just 60 picks. But there are more players out there that can be picked that go undrafted and so forth. So, we're getting a lot of international questions here, but let's keep it rolling, Mark.
It's not great because I'm not. They're not going to be a fan of my list then. But I'll just cover these 2 comments because I'm not going to get to them in my top 30. What's your opinion on Neemias Queta? Guy went to Utah State. He's definitely interesting. He's a guy that I'd be interested in the second round, maybe for the Sixers. He's not a stretch big by any means. He doesn't shoot the ball at all, but he gets to the line. He gets rebounds. He blocks shots. He's a rim running big. How tall is he? I forget actually. 7 foot. Yeah. He's got all the makings to be a solid backup center. Maybe a second round pick. So I understand. I see the vision on him. Not a guy I'm too excited by, and then a guy that I'll just get in front of it because this is maybe the guy I like the least in the draft. Josh Giddey. Yeah, this is a guy that I'm just so out on. You watch his tape, I think he's got the ugliest shot I've ever seen, maybe. But I just don't see anything in his game that's going to translate other than the fact that he has that Ricky Rubio, Rajon Rondo level vision. And that obviously is an elite skill. And I said that before, but that being your only thing. And I don't think he's athletic enough personally. I don't think he's going to be a good enough defender. And the shot is really the biggest thing. I just don't see it with Giddey. So he's not in my top 30, which is another controversial thing. So Sengun and Giddey, 2 international guys that are going to go really high. I'm not in on them. Sometimes I am really in on international players. I was really in on Giannis back in the day. But I was in on Killian Hayes last year. So there's been plenty of international guys I like. This year, they don't excite me too much. So it's not necessarily exciting for the international guys out there. But I think that's talking about Neemias Queta.
My guy in the second round is, who it is, Sandro Mamukelashvili. It's pick your poison. Obviously, he doesn't have the rim protection, but I love his just overall skill package of playmaking and creating for others and shooting and, his footwork. I love Sandro. I love Mamu. So, but then I think that's in that range of stretch bigs there in that second round.
I would definitely prefer Sandro to that guy. I'm more familiar with Sandro. I've seen him more as a Villanova fan who's watched a ton of that conference. He's a guy who's taken over a lot of Creighton games. He had a lot of big games this year. He had a lot of bad games too, and that's why he's a second round pick. But in the NBA as a backup, he wouldn't be afforded really those opportunities to really let it go and really shoot it way too much. But as a stretch 5 or maybe even a 4 sometimes. In certain offenses, I think he makes a ton of sense as a high second round pick. When I really narrow in on the second round for the next few days, I'm sure he's going to be a guy I have in the 30s. So moving on to what's up?
I was just going to say, I just released my top 5 for the second round, and Sandro was my number 5 target for the Sixers.
All right, yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, especially, I guess we're not keeping Ben Simmons, but if we were keeping Ben Simmons, he would make a ton of sense in terms of as a stretch 5 next to Ben Simmons. But no matter what, stretch 5 would fit on this team. So let's get to my next tier. This is just a tier 2 guys, or a tier 3 guys, point guards who are extremely successful at the college level, whose stats look very similar in a lot of ways. So these are 3 guys. I wouldn't mind however you have them ranked out there, but I like all of these guys more than consensus. Jared Butler out of Baylor is my number 12 prospect. Ayo Dosunmu is number 13, and Tre Mann is number 14. These are all Sixers guys that Dives has covered, and these are guys that have the opportunity to possibly be there at 28. So Jared Butler is the first guy we're talking about here. 22 points per game per 40, 4.5 rebounds, 6.3 assists per game, only 3.7 turnovers on 2.6 steals per game. Him and Suggs are probably neck and neck as the best on-ball defenders on point guard. Suggs probably has a little bit of an advantage due to a height and a wingspan advantage, but Butler's right behind him. Butler's a guy who shot 8.5 threes per 40, which is tied for second among my top 28. There's only one guy who shot more threes per 40 that I'm going to talk about on this show. So that's something that you see and you love in terms of being a Sixers fan. You see 8.5 threes attempted per 40. Tobias Harris shoots 40% from 3, and he takes like 3 a game. So it would be nice to have a guy who shoots the hell out of the 3 ball. So that's exactly what Jared Butler does. He did have a bit of a health scare where his heart was flagged. So for a couple weeks there, I do think that it hurt his draft stock. It seemed like he was creeping into the late lottery, creeping up the boards. And it's been, 18 to 28. I've seen him. It's way lower than when right after Baylor won the national championship. And I don't think that's necessarily fair. You see it right there on the clip. He shoots deep threes. He has deep range, and that's something I actually value. I've always, even before Lillard and Steph were doing it, I've always thought that that's something that certain guys have the ability to do, and it really opens up the rest of the offense. You see it with Lillard, you see it with Steph, you see it with even Trey, Luka. Luka's not very good at it, but it still opens up the offense so much for Dallas. So that's something that could be really huge for the Sixers and really huge for even right away for the bench. I think Jared Butler's a guy who can come in right away, but he's a guy I would not expect to get past the Lakers at 22. He makes so much sense to fit in right to what the Lakers need. And I think he would step in right away and everyone would be in love with him. He'd be the new Alex Caruso. I think everyone would think he'd be unbelievable. And then the next guy here I have is Ayo Dosunmu. And this is a guy that he's polarizing, I think, among draft circles. I saw some quotes in a Chad Ford thing that NBA GMs are saying, I don't understand why people aren't saying he's a lottery pick. And then there was another GM who said he wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't go in the top 40. So there's such a wide range on opinions on Ayo. He's a guy that I'm personally high on because I watched him play so much. And similar to Davion Mitchell, this guy stayed in college. He's a bit older than a couple of these other prospects, but with a guy like these guys, he worked so hard at the things that he needed to become a better draft prospect. Ayo became an excellent three-point shooter this year, which is never in the cards for him in the prior years because he's such a defensive whiz. He covers 1-2 positions. He is a point guard, 6 assists per game on only 4 turnovers per game. So, and then when you add, if his shot, just like I said with Davion Mitchell, if his 3-point shot from last year is legitimate, then this is a guy that people are going to kick themselves for passing up on, because if he can shoot the 3, he can do everything else at such a high level that I don't really understand why people are low on him. And then before I let Dives cut in, just because I think we can cover all 3 of these guys kind of together, Tre Mann is my number 14 prospect to round out what would be my lottery. So Tre Mann is a guy out of Florida. He actually grew an inch. He's a 6'5" combo guard. Tre Mann's a guy who I would like to see him shoot a bit more threes or get to the line a bit more. If he did one of those more exceptionally well, he would be above a guy like Ayo, above a guy like Jared Butler, but this is a guy who does make tough shots. He makes amazing passes. He had an amazing shot at the end of the first day of the NCAA tournament to send a game to overtime, in which Florida eventually won. So he's a baller. He's a dog, Tre Mann. He's a guy that I could absolutely get behind. He's a guy that earlier on in this draft process, I believe I was even tweeting at Dibes about it, telling him to get high. Oh, that's a deep three right there from Tre Mann. That's some NBA range right there. Which is, by the way, that's a phrase I hate when I'm reading scouting reports. NBA range, as if it's like that different from college. Oh, it's frustrating. Even though I just said it. But I think that Tre Mann is an interesting prospect who I was more in love with kind of a couple of weeks ago. But when I kind of compared him to these other guys, and you see that he does shoot so much less from three, and he does get to the line at a way lower clips than some of these guys, it did make me kind of question how high I had him. But just, when I was watching, I don't want to get too far away because I watch so much college basketball, and I kind of note a little bit, these are the guys that I like during the college basketball season. I don't want to get too far away from that, but when you are kind of comparing these guys, it's hard to defend Tre Mann over Jared Butler for me, for example. So that's why I ended up lowering him a bit in my rankings.
All right, so let's start off with Jared Butler. I just love watching Tre Mann. I could watch this all freaking day long. Let me restart it so I don't forget. Going back to Jared, I'll talk on Jared Butler and I'll talk on Tre Mann because I got those two higher than Dosimo. Ayo is just too unselfish for me. Like I need a bucket getter. Like he's good in his own right, but I need a guy that look at that, like a step back. You saw like transition three. Just goes over the screen, shoots it over the screen. Like we don't have anybody that does that. Like other than like Seth Curry, which we cannot rely on again and again and again in the playoffs. We need guards that can come in and shoot it from literally the logo like Tre Mann just did right there. Jared Butler, amazing. I love Jared Butler. You see Tre Mann operating the pick and roll. That is his bread and butter. And I think he's actually really good at setting up teammates more so than he is scoring, which is a huge compliment. For Jared Butler, he's also amazing off the ball. And that's what I love about Jared Butler. As good as he is with the ball in his hands, that dude catch and shoot, one of the best in the draft. His points per possession is 1.5, which is amazing. These are two of the top scorers, just like Cam Thomas, in the entire draft. This would be a no-brainer if they're available for the Sixers at number 28. Daryl Morey better bust his ass to the podium if they're sitting there. It's just a clear fit. You look at the Sixers' lack of offense in that playoffs. No one wanted to shoot the ball. It was like pass, or spread the court, give it to Joel on the perimeter and let him post up. Now here you've got Jared Butler, Tre Mann, two guys that can run a pick and roll, facilitate for others, and create for others while also spacing the floor. So these are two clear fits.
Yeah, who do you like more out of between Butler and Mann?
Tre Mann.
Tre Mann, okay. I had Butler just a little higher just because of the volume of three-point shooting, but I can 100% get behind Tre Mann. I think both of those guys would provide a great spark to the Sixers offense. Jared Butler would be number 2 on my Sixers big board. Ayo would be I'm sorry?
I don't expect Tre Mann to be available at all. There's no
It seems like he's falling. I don't understand what's happening. It seems like he's going in that 25 to 30 range, which is wild to me. I think Butler going 18 to 26. I think Ayo going 25 to 30. I think all three of these guys are being undervalued. I know you're not as high on Ayo as I am, but I think all three of these guys are being really undervalued, and I think all three are going to be solid pros. And all three would be welcome for me on the Sixers.
I do want to say that, come draft night when we're going to be live streaming, the money shot of this NBA draft in terms of me and drinking heavily and being just obnoxious and super anxious is that after pick 18, 19, 20, that's when all of these guys are slotted to go. So I'm going to be a hot mess. So guys, if you're watching, make sure you join us draft night live. We'll be live streaming and reacting to every single pick here. And I will be sweating bullets because this is where that it gets really crazy.
No, it's going to be a blast. I can't wait. So yeah, we're going to get there. We're going to get the bones. Jameson keeps saying, "Hey, Mark, what's up, Jameson?" The Braves won 2-0. Yeah, I had that in the bet. Thank you for reminding me. And it helps the Phillies, who are up 1-0, by the way. But so here we'll get to number 15 and number 16. I'm not going to spend too much time on these guys. Not Sixers targets at all. These are guys I'm way lower on than consensus. Scotty Barnes at number 15 and Franz Wagner at number 16. Let's talk about Scotty Barnes first. And if this was, maybe if Ben Simmons panned out a little differently, I'd look at Scotty Barnes a little differently. But I do think the Ben Simmons comparison is a little, I don't necessarily love it. I think he's a bit more Draymond than Ben. A lot of people have talked about him being that point forward, maybe being able to run an offense at the NBA. I know he averaged 6.5 assists, so I know he was a hell of a ball handler at Florida State. But if you watch it and you watch his handle, I don't think it's tight enough to be a primary ball handler, even really the secondary ball handler on an NBA team. So I have a lot of doubts about Scotty Barnes. He doesn't get to the line at all. He doesn't shoot the ball from the line well at all. He doesn't shoot the three at all. He doesn't shoot it efficiently. So those are a lot of worries for me. He's a great defender. He's an interesting player. He's a really weird player. It looks like he's going to go number 5 to Orlando, and that makes so much sense to me. I just think he's going to go waste away like Aaron Gordon and my guy Jonathan Isaac and all the other long guys that they've taken over the years. There's so many of them, so I think it makes so much sense. I would rather see them go with a Kuminga over at Scotty Barnes, and I'm not even necessarily high on Kuminga, but I see the upside. And when you're Orlando, you're OKC, you should be taking the most high upside pick. And then number 16, speaking of not having high upside, Franz Wagner. I just don't understand why. You look at Kispert, you can at least say, Kispert shot 8.1 threes per game per 40. He made 3.6. Franz Wagner never even shot the three that well. Like he was like a 34% 3-point shooter on like an average amount of attempts, and everything about him is being 3 and D, 3 and D, 3 and D. And I never watched Michigan, and his athleticism stood out to me. So that 3 and D thing, he didn't make threes at an exceptionally high rate, and he didn't play impact defense to the lot. I watched a lot of Michigan. They were a number 1 seed last year. They were a pretty big team in college basketball, and Franz Wagner jumped off the screen less than a guy like Isaiah Livers did, honestly.
I was just about to say that.
100%. I don't have Livers ranked here. He would be right outside of it. I really like him as a second round option. And Franz, he was your number 4 guy. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. So Franz Wagner, I get the NBA frame. I get the NBA body, 6'9", 6'11", wingspan. So there are reasons to, I have him at 16. So I'm not saying, he's not a first round pick, but he's supposed to go number 9 to Sacramento, allegedly. And that's such a Sacramento pick. And I just can't believe that that's how they're going to use the 9th pick, when I do think there's a lot of guys with high upside. So Scotty Barnes, Franz Wagner, that's my own little tier there of guys I don't really like. I could probably be talked into even lowering them on this list, but those are my number 15 and 16 guys. And then number 17 to number 25, I don't think a lot separates these guys at all. Like, I think number 17 and number 25, these are all in the same tier for me. You could talk me into, hiring my number 23 guy. I'm sure you'll try to talk me into upping him. You could talk me into getting him all the way to 17, and you could talk me into my 18 guy dropping all the way to 25. So I think these guys just have very specific skills and very specific reasons why they're all in the same tier. But I've changed my rankings on these a million times over the last couple of weeks. So starting it out with number 17, a guy that wasn't in my first top 30, Quentin Grimes. The more and more I look at this guy, the more and more I love him. He does everything we need. It seems like he's almost like I don't want to say Marcus Smart, because I think that might be a bit disrespectful to Quentin Grimes offensively. I think he has a higher offensive ceiling than what Marcus Smart is. Maybe the last 2 years of Marcus Smart, the guy who's been shooting a good amount of threes. But Quentin Grimes is another guy who shot 8.3 threes per 40. That's one of the highest among my top 28. And then you look at him on defense, and he's a bulldog. He's just someone who's out there causing havoc in a play right there like that, getting on transition. He's just a guy that's easy to fall in love with as you watch tape of him. It seems like he's always trying harder than everyone else on the floor. And I know that that's kind of dumb, but you look at Matisse, Maxey, it feels like those guys are the same way. And those are the kind of guys that the Sixers have liked over the last couple of years. And honestly, if you had a gun to my head, I don't know why this would be a situation where there'd be a gun to my head forcing me to make a choice on who the Sixers are going to pick. But if there was, my prediction would be Quentin Grimes. I think this is the guy who they're going to take at 28, and I think he makes a ton of sense to fit right into the Sixers.
Yeah, this is one of those areas where, like, what is your biggest position of need for the Sixers in this draft? What does the big board say for you? Every single year, literally until this year, I will go 3-and-D. Give me the guy that projects best defensively, that's most versatile, can defend on the perimeter, defend multiple positions, and shoot from three. And I think he's got a little facilitating potential as well. He was one of the key cogs of one of the best defensive teams in college basketball last year. Love Quentin Grimes. For me personally, I need an on-ball creator. I need a guy that can facilitate a pick and roll, and that's why I have several guys ahead of him. But you look at the needs of the Sixers, it's a clear fit. It's 100% a clear fit. Quentin Grimes, like you said, Mark, fits in that slush of guys, which I think is the meat and potatoes of this draft. There's a lot of guys here at number 28, assuming they keep their pick. That'd be great fits. And Quentin Grimes is he was on my bubble of my top 5, but I love him, and I think he's definitely going to be one of those guys that we'll be talking about a lot on draft night.
So, yeah, he would be my number 5 Sixers big board guy. So if we're saying Cam Thomas number 1, Jared Butler number 2, I would assume number 3, Trey Mann number 4, and Quentin Grimes number 5. And moving on to my next guy, number 6, and it's not a guy that I think you've covered. I was actually looking for the video today to see your guys' thoughts. Jaden Springer out of Tennessee. It seems like he's fallen a little bit in this draft process. Him and Keon Johnson. It actually seems like both Tennessee guards, it looked like they were for sure lottery picks at one point of this process. And now it seems both of them could fall out of the lottery. I don't know really what the reasoning is behind that, but most people prefer Keon Johnson due to his athletic ability and his sick vertical leap. And he just projects really athletically well to the NBA. But Jaden Springer is just a basketball player. He's an absolute genius. He's an offensive savant, in my opinion, when you watch Jaden Springer. He turned it over a bit too much, 4 turnovers to his 5 assists per game, but I think he's a true point guard. I think Tennessee has a bad offensive scheme with Rick Barnes. Shout out Parlay Petey, Marky Mark, with the comment. But Jaden Springer is a guy I like a lot. He gets to the line at will, and he's efficient once he gets there, making 5 and 6.2 attempts per 40. I'd like to see him shoot a bit more from 3. You watch the mechanics. They're there. He makes 1.2 out of 2.8 attempts per 40, and I wish that he would just shoot it a bit more because I think he's got the potential to really, if he starts shooting a bit more at a higher clip and maintains somewhat of the same efficiency. This is a guy who I think is a great facilitator. He had 2 steals per game. Him and Keon Johnson were absolutely insane. One of the best defensive backcourts in college basketball that I can remember. So Jaden Springer, just a dog on defense, a smart basketball player. It's really the shot that's going to make or break and determine what he is. Have you looked into him at all?
I have not. No, he's not. Somehow he just got off the radar. I don't know.
No, I truly think it's probably because he thought he was out of reach. It seemed like it seemed like when you guys started probably making the list for the prospects, him and Keon Johnson were like, yeah, you can forget about that. They're going to go way before that, but they've both fallen. I'm telling you, check him out. He's a fun player to watch. But like I said, it's really going to determine the 3-point shot's going to determine what he is. If he's an excellent 3-point shooter, a lot of people are going to be kicking himself. If he can't shoot the 3, is he Elfrid Payton? And that's kind of the worry with guys like that. That's the worry with guys like that for sure. I believe in the mechanics a bit more than an Elfrid Payton type player. But let's get to a guy that a lot of people like in Nah'Shon Bones Highland, but I'm never going to call him Nah'Shon because Bones, what a nickname. You see that deep 3 right there. VCU was a team I bet on a lot, and every once in a while I'd turn them on like NBCSN, and you see this guy just taking 40-footers, step back, and it's like, who does this guy think he is? And when you got a nickname like Bones, you have the confidence to go out there and shoot deep 3s. He's a very interesting player. A bit like Cam Thomas, you could say. Just he's a more volume and efficient 3-point shooter as opposed to Cam Thomas, who's just a walking parade to the free throw line. So they're different a little bit, but you could say that these are maybe the two.
Oh my God.
him and Cam Thomas for me are like the two most fun players to watch. Maybe like I was saying. Quentin Grimes, the more I watch him, the more I love him. But just in terms of like, oh my God, like the shot selection from Cam Thomas and Bones Highland is pretty funny. Bones Highland is absolutely an interesting player. He'd be number 7 on my Sixers big board. I don't know, is he a 2 guard in your opinion?
I think he's versatile enough that like in the worst case scenario, he's a great 3-and-D. Off-ball guard. So that's what is attractive. He's my number 2. He's my number 2 for the Sixers at number 28. For me personally, I need creators. I need shot creators. This guy does it all. Off the ball, on the ball. He's great in pick and roll, which it's finally time to give Joel Embiid an actual pick and roll point guard. He's super crafty with the ball in his hands. He can change speeds on a dime like Sam Cassell. And like literally having him develop under Sam Cassell is one of those like low-key storylines I would love to see moving forward because he's got that like craftiness with the ball in his hands. And we talk about floor spacing, one of the best when it comes to transition scoring, shooting off the ball. Just his handle's terrific. So look at that. Come on, like the Sixers haven't had a guy like that in years. So it'd be amazing fit.
He reminds me an absolute ton of a guy that I heard a guy named Austin Krell apparently tries to claim as his own. But he reminds me a lot of Emmanuel Quickly from last year, a guy that I was in love with in the draft. Definitely a lot of similarities there. I'm not sure if he has the floater that Quickly has, which is what I love so much about Quickly. But the reason that Highland's not higher for me is I'm a little bit worried about his ability to create for others. And with that height, I think that he probably has to. If he was 6'5", this would be a different conversation, I think, because I'd be so sure that he's a 2 guard, and I would feel really confident. He does have an over 6'9" wingspan, I believe. So I do think that he does make up for some of his height there and being able to probably cover 2s. So I'm a little bit worried about that. But if he was, either an inch and a half taller or a bit of a better creator for others, he'd be a top 15 or a lottery pick guy. But because he's not, you have to look at the positives, though. He's taking the most threes per 40 of any guy that I've talked about on this list. 9.4 threes per 40. And you can tell when you watch these highlights, it's just, the Sixers could use a guy who would go take 9.4 threes per 40. And that, it's pretty easy to see how he would fit into this team. But any team, I really think, could welcome 3-point shooting. It's 2021. And obviously, 3 points are more than 2. I'm no mathematician, but so Bones Highland is definitely a guy that I could see myself even in the next couple days kicking myself for not ranking a bit higher. And then the next guy, never mind. Next guy at number 20 is a guy I do like a lot. Miles McBride is a guy that is another similar to Quentin Grimes. When I first started ranking these, I was like, oh, those guys are fun, but I don't know, first rounders, I'm not quite sure. They seem like second round guys to me. But Miles McBride, Deuce McBride, whatever you want to call him, the more I watch him as another guy, the more I like him. And you look at what he became last year at West Virginia, the facilitator, while being able to limit turnovers, 5.5 assists per 40, 2.5 turnovers per 40. Dubs, have turnovers been a problem for the Sixers or something in the past?
I'm not sure. You tell me.
So a guy that can handle.
I do. Yeah, I think I blacked out fourth quarter turnovers.
But yeah, a guy that can handle and, you don't have to worry about him turning the ball over at a frequent rate would be absolutely welcome to the Sixers. And Miles McBride comes from West Virginia. So that means that Bob Huggins got him ready defensively, and he turned himself into one of the better defenders in college basketball. I was tweeting out some clips today. If you want to go check out my Twitter, his footwork is unbelievable defensively. He doesn't even have to slide his feet. He can just move with anybody. He stays in front of you. He cuts off transition so well. And then you can see his wingspan when you watch him, because it really allows him. He might be a 6'2" guy. I've heard some people say they're worried he's a one-position defender in the NBA, but similar to Bones Highland, I think he could probably cover 2s with that wingspan. So I'm high on this guy. He's another guy similar to Bones Hyland, similar to Quentin Grimes, who have just risen up my board as we've went along, and I could see myself even by draft night. If they make this pick, I would be talking myself in like no one's business into Miles McBride.
Yeah, he's a bulldog. He's a 100% a bulldog. He's my number 5 for the Sixers at number 28. I love his ability to play on the ball. I love his ability to defend on the ball. I love his ability to pull up, facilitate a pick and roll, shoot off the catch. This guy checks a lot of boxes. And mainly for me, like you actually brought up Marcus Smart. Like I'd see this kid as just a dog, just an absolute dog when it comes to defense. A two-way guy that can really do a lot of really good things. Miles McBride, Deuce McBride is my number 4.
Yeah, I actually had Javon Carter down, but he's probably in an offensively advanced Javon Carter. But if you look at Javon Carter's numbers for Memphis, he's actually been a really solid backup point guard. But he's probably a souped up Javon Carter, which is an easy comp because he's a West Virginia point guard. But he's a guy. Marcus Smart makes a ton of sense too. He's a bulldog. He shoots a lot of threes. Makes a ton of sense. I mean, I don't know if it was that possession right there, but he had possessions where he was locking down Cade Cunningham. West Virginia, right there, yeah. He had what's up?
He plays a lot bigger. I think you said it. Like he plays a lot bigger than 6'2", a lot bigger.
Yeah, for sure. His wingspan allows him to, and his footwork allows him to. I think both of those things are such elite traits that he has defensively that he can hide the fact that he may not be 6'5". He's a 6'2" guy, obviously, but I think he's a guy who can play the 1 offensively, and I don't have worries that he can't play the 2 defensively. So that's a pretty valuable thing, especially for the Sixers. But the biggest thing, and I said it with him, is the turnovers for me. The ability and the fact that he was not a point guard type player when he first started at West Virginia, and he was a scorer, and he turned himself into a volume 3-point shooter who also can handle, who also doesn't turn the ball over at a high rate. But like similar to a couple other guys that I mentioned with these guards, if he would have gotten to the line more or shot even more threes, then he would have been a guy I'm even way higher on. So Miles McBride is a guy that I really do like. And then we're getting to another 2 guys that I'm lower on the consensus. And number 21 is a guy who I liked all college basketball season. So it kind of hurts me to kind of not like him as much, but it's Chris Duarte out of Oregon, old man Chris Duarte. I think he's 24. He was the oldest player in college basketball last year. He's the oldest player in the draft this year. He's a polished player. I think he's a guy who a lot of people seem to think could step in right away and do what he was doing at Oregon. He was a junior college player, so he was from the Dominican Republic, so that could have something to do with that. But he landed at Oregon and then ended up blossoming into a volume 3-point shooter. And a very good defender as well. I mean, pretty good on-ball defender, pretty good side-to-side. Doesn't create a ton of havoc. Actually, no, I'm wrong. I was looking at the wrong stat line. 2.2 steals per 40 is pretty good. So I think he's a really good defender. I think a lot of it is scheme. Oregon does have such a weird defensive scheme that gives everyone problems, especially when you get to the NCAA tournament. So I'm not sure if that was a bit more scheme or a bit more personnel. So I'm not quite as high on Chris Duarte as most, but the main thing I wanted to talk about, and it's something I pointed out in our group chat today, when you compare a guy like Quentin Grimes to a guy like Chris Duarte, all draft process, I would have been like, oh, Duarte, what are we even talking about? But when you look at these guys per 40, I just don't understand the reasoning to go Duarte over Quentin Grimes, especially by the margin that it seems like they're ranked. Chris Duarte seems like he's going to be a late lottery, maybe 15 to 20 pick at worst. And Quentin Grimes, it seems like he's going to be lucky if he goes in the first round. So I don't get the gap there between those 2 guys. Quentin Grimes, 22 per 40. Chris Duarte averaged 18.5 per 40. Quentin Grimes averaged more rebounds. They had the same assists. Grimes had less turnovers. Grimes had the similar defensive numbers, better advanced defensive numbers, got to the line at a higher rate, and shot the ball at a higher rate, at a more efficient rate from 3, and at a higher clip from 3. So that's just so many things. And also not to mention the fact that he's 3 years younger. He was a higher pedigree player coming out of high school. He was a high recruit at Kansas a few years ago before he ended up going to Houston, Quentin Grimes. Well, Chris Duarte is obviously a 24-year-old who we think maybe, has topped out. I think Chris Duarte is a little bit what he is personally. I think that you look at a guy like Ayo, when I was talking about being in on an older guy because he worked on what he was bad at and became better. I think Chris Duarte has kind of been the same player since he got to Oregon. He's just a good shooter. He did become a better defender, so we'll see if that's able to translate at the next level, but I have some doubts about that. But Chris Duarte is a guy that I liked a lot, and as we get closer, I'm kind of fading on.
Yeah, sure. So the one advanced stat that I think you missed there is true shooting percentage. Chris Duarte had a 65% true shooting percentage. Quentin Grimes, 55. Both are, well,
that's fair.
Chris Duarte is amazing. But
Yeah.
It's pretty strong for a scoring guard. But anyway, I like Chris Duarte very much for the reason that, he's 24, can step right in. You talk about something that Daryl Morey, Brett Brown, the Sixers have historically which is blocks and steals. Chris Duarte brings those kind of traits to the Sixers. So this guy, one of those guys, you might be right. Could it be a scheme fit? Not sure. But that is definitely something that Chris Duarte brings. So he brings that shooting, he brings the defense. But I'm not someone that puts Duarte. He is my number 3 for the Sixers.
Wow, that was a hell of a dunk right there. I didn't see that one. So
I do have a top 5. I made a video on it. I made a post on it. But I have Grimes in my bubble, and I have Duarte as number 3. But I don't think that gap is that significant. I fully agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not saying that. Obviously, per 40 stats in college aren't going to dictate if who's better in the NBA. There's a lot of things that are going to go into that, where they land, how hard they work once they get there. There's so many things that are going to play into that. But for me, it's more so like what you said. The gap that's being in every rankings, in every mock draft, I just don't see that gap at all. So I think they're very similar players, and I just think Grimes edges them out in some areas, and that's why I'm personally higher on Grimes. And then another guy that I'm not in love with here at number 22. I don't think he's a guy that's going to be available for the Sixers, so I'll kind of skim past him. Is Keon Johnson, the other guy, like I was talking about with Jaden Springer at Tennessee. They had a great defensive backcourt. I have him as my number 22. 6'5", shooting guard, 6'7" wingspan, but he jumps out of the building. I think he had the highest vertical leap. Really young guy. He turned it over as much as he assisted, so that's not necessarily good. But he got to the line at will, and that's a Tennessee Rick Barnes classic there. So I don't know if that's necessarily a scheme thing. But once he got there, he didn't shoot it all that well, close to 70% from the free throw line. So it's not like he's some knockdown shooter. And then obviously not a 3-point shooter, 1 for 3 per 40 at Tennessee. So I have a lot of doubts about Keon Johnson, but it's easy to see the athleticism, and it's easy to see the athletic profile that, would show you that he has the upside to improve on his jumper and a lot of things and make himself, worth that lottery pick that it seems like he's going to be picked with. So moving on to your guy, and I'm going to clear out for an ISO from Dives here for Trey Murphy.
Trey freaking Murphy, man, just out head over heels with this guy. He was literally, I think, the second or third guy Tiago and I covered back in what month is it? March?
Probably, yeah.
Just absolutely love this kid. You look at the Sixers' struggles, especially in that half court in the playoffs. They could not get anything done. This guy's 99th percentile offensively. Obviously, it's on a lot of low attempts. The sample size is not that great. He had kind of a weird role at Virginia, but this is just one of those elite 3-and-D prospects that I have personally as my number 1 on my Sixers big board, and I would rate him above all the guys we just talked about for the Sixers. Cutting to the basket, like you just saw, finishing around the rim, one of the best in college basketball, period. You look at, an area that I think Doc can unleash is having guys cut to the basket a lot more. Matisse Thybulle was one of the best at it his rookie year. They went away from it his sophomore year under Doc Rivers. I want to see that kind of come back to that Sixers offense. Maybe that happens with a pick and roll point guard and a lot more ball movement, which completely stalled there as the regular season moved close and in that playoff. So for me, Trey Murphy defensively is one of the best in the game. You look at his wingspan, you look at his foot speed, you look at his technique, you look at his closing speed. It's just bananas. absolutely. But he reminds me of Tayshaun Prince, who is like, for me personally, a top 5 player of all time. I love Tayshaun Prince. Not all time.
Favorite. I got you.
All time. One of my favorite players of all time. And this is one of those guys that if he's available at 20, 21, 22, I will be sweating bullets because I would trade up for him 100% to get a guy like that could step in. You look at the Atlanta Hawks series, it was beyond clear the Sixers need more length. This guy would do that. Imagine Matisse and Trey Murphy coming in as like a 6th or 7th guy off the in that rotation. So for me, Trey Murphy is my favorite player for the Sixers.
I like Trey Murphy. I see a lot of the reasons to be high on him. I do think that there's a couple. When you watched Virginia last year, it just felt like they were at times in close games and in 55 to 50 games. They just needed someone to step up at the end of the game. And if I would have saw Trey Murphy step up a little bit more offensively and take that onus on him to really get a basket and kind of, off the dribble or make a play himself or make a play for someone else, he'd be higher on this list. But when you look at the fact that he's a volume 3-point shooter, tied for second among 3 points attempted per 40 among my guys, or among my top 30 personally, I can totally see where he would fit on the Sixers team. You mentioned as a cutter, that also would help a lot. So, but mainly the reason that he fits for me on the Sixers team is, filling in the Mike Scott role, filling in the Furkan Korkmaz role of just launching threes, coming in there, and that's all you got to do. Go stand in the corner, go stand on the wing, and launch threes. Every once in a while, cut and keep the defense honest, obviously, kind of like Joe Harris a little bit. I know it's different. He's a forward, but I totally see the vision with all that. I just have a bit of concerns about him being able to take guys off the dribble or create for others. But hopefully with the players that he would have around him wherever he went, those aren't things that he would necessarily have to do as a role player. You see with guys like Mikal Bridges, they emphasize the strengths and not necessarily expose the weaknesses. That was a hell of a dunk on that reel right there. But yeah. I think he's an exciting player and an exciting fit specifically for the Sixers. But just from an overall in a vacuum standpoint, those couple negatives that I mentioned, along with age, obviously, were what held him back. But like I said, 17 to 25 to me is all the same tier. So I had him at number 23. But if they took him over a Quentin Grimes, if Quentin Grimes was the best guy available on my board and they took Trey Murphy, I wouldn't be like, oh, I can't believe we didn't take Quentin Grimes. You know what I mean? Because I think both of these players are very good and both these players would fit very well. And all these players in this tier for me, besides, Keon Johnson, who's not really Sixers target, all these guys would fit really well with the Sixers, and I'd be happy with any of them.
Yep.
So moving on to my next guy, who I know I'm going to be higher on this guy than most people. I haven't seen him mocked in a first round in weeks. But Jeremiah Robinson Earl from Villanova. I'm biased. I'm a Villanova fan. So I've watched more of this guy than anyone in the draft class. But he's a 6'9" combo forward with a 6'10" wingspan. You wish that wingspan was a little better. When you watch him defensively, you wouldn't know that he didn't have a plus wingspan because of the things he's able to do and the ground he's able to cover and the way he's able to stay in front of guys like he did right there and make plays late on the ball. I think that his athleticism is sneaky. Like he has it in bursts. Like he's not consistently, this marvel of an athlete. But like you saw with that block, like you saw with that alley-oop right there, he has flashes of oh my God, if this guy can put it together, he can really go a long way. And we've seen it time and time and time again with these Villanova guys. Once they get to the NBA, they are able to accept a role and fill in what they need to do so well. And I know that I usually yell at people who, just predict things based on where someone went to college, especially with quarterbacks, people who I'll never take an Ohio State quarterback. I usually yell at people with things like that. So I'm not just saying, take every Villanova player, but we've seen so many times that these role player type guys from Villanova are able to accept their role, able to assimilate into any NBA team. And I have no doubt that JRE is going to be able to do it. 9 rebounds per 40. He's an excellent rebounder for his size. And he's an excellent defender laterally. I think he can defend maybe threes and fours probably. And that's something, maybe he's a stretch 5 here and there. Obviously, like a lot of the guys that we talked about, it's going to depend on his jumper. It's going to depend on the 3-point shot probably. If he can be a consistently good 3-point shooter, that really changes the outlook of his career. And I said this for Evan Mobley, so I'm only using it twice for this entire podcast, and I'm banning myself from saying it for the rest of the NBA draft season. But even though the stats aren't there, I believe in the jumper. I believe in the mechanics. I think JRE can become a good 3-point shooter personally, and that's really going to be the key for him.
Yeah, I'm not high on this guy. This is probably a second-round pick for me, and he didn't even make my second-round list for me personally. I just don't know what he is at the next level. I don't believe in that foot speed. I think he got it done in college because he's just bigger than everyone else, and I don't see him, shooting well enough to be, to play the 4. I don't see his foot speed enough to defend the wing on the perimeter. I think he gets by with amazing IQ, and I think he's super well coached. And I think he's a great kid. You look at the shot selection at Villanova; it was putrid. But I don't blame him for that. So I'm really excited to see how he projects at the next level under, a different system, for sure. So it was a really weird watch for me when I deep dived into this kid. And the JRE is one of those guys that I come out of the draft loving every single year, and he wasn't one of them. So I'm just confused to kind of it's hard for me to project. Like, you look at Trey Murphy, that guy is a pure NBA skill. That guy is going to translate. You look at JRE, I just don't know what he's going to become and where he's going to be, to what positions he's going to be able to defend. I don't see him as a stretch 5. He would get eaten alive, even though he rebounded well in college. I'm just a little concerned. But then again, you don't doubt Villanova players because they have succeeded in every level.
It's not an apples to apples comparison for me. They're not like the same exact player or anything. I could see him being a similar player to Dario Saric a little bit. He's not as much of a creator as Dario, and he's probably a markedly better defender, at least with 4s, than Dario. And Dario's turned himself into a bit of a stretch 5. I know he was playing stretch 5 for Phoenix, and when he went down, that ended up hurting them. So I think that I think he's a bit of a better rebounder than Dario too. So I think that he does have a lot of Dario in his game. That was the first person who popped out when I was watching.
I see it. I see like the high IQ, great for others. I totally see that. Yep.
For sure. And like you said, the main and this is just I need to emphasize this. Like you said, great kid, high IQ, well coached. That's such an important thing. I think that when a team gets him in the top half of the second round or the bottom half of the first round, they're getting a kid who's going to work his ass off and not cause any problems and fit right in as a role player and accept his role. And I think that's pretty important when you're talking about these types of guys. And then at number 25, you have a guy who's pretty tantalizing. It's so many question marks here. With Josh Primo out of Alabama. I have my number 25 overall prospect, 6'6", 6'9" wingspan. I believe out of my top 28, he had the lowest points per game per 40. But you watch the offense. If you watched Alabama last year, he was like a role player. He was a piece to the side. They had a ton of players. Alabama was really good. Herb Jones was their main guy. They had Shackelford as a pretty important role. They had another guy. I can't remember his name right now. Oh, man, that's going to bother me. But what'd you say?
Was it Herbert Jones?
No, I said Herb Jones. There's another name on Alabama. Herb Jones, Shackelford, Josh Primo. There was another one who took a lot of shots. I can't remember who it is. That's going to kill me. But Josh Primo was he's very young. I believe he's the youngest player in the draft. Yeah, I think he's the youngest player in the draft. I think I saw that when I was looking some stuff up today.
He didn't turn 19 until December.
Oh man, that makes me feel so old. Oh man, I'm calling Chris Duarte an old man. I better get myself in a walker. But
this kid is 6 years younger than Chris Duarte.
I know that's pretty funny to think about when you compare them, and that is something that's probably important to think about. That's probably something maybe I'm being a bit too low on Primo here, but I've seen him mocked. To teams like Houston at 23 or 24, teams like Denver at 26. Those are teams that can afford to take a swing, and I could totally see that panning out. If this guy's better than we think in a bigger role or an expanded role, he definitely has high upside. He's someone who shot the 3 pretty well and shot it at a high clip for the amount that he played. And I think his jumper looks really smooth. If you watch him shoot the three, I think it's something that gets off pretty fast. I don't think the release is too high or too low. I think that it's a pretty good jumper, and I buy it even for such a young kid. I think that he's someone who can step in right away and make some threes at the very least. Obviously, what is he defensively? Yeah. I'm not quite sure. Alabama did not exactly play a lot of defense. So it's hard to know what any of the defenders there, including a guy I'll get to in a minute. But that really finishes the tier there of 17 to 25, starting with Quentin Grimes to Josh Primo at 25. I don't think that there's much separating Grimes and Primo, and they're on the opposite ends of the spectrum here.
Yeah, just a great off-ball weapon. Like you said, this guy doesn't turn 19 until December. He's one of the great mysteries of this draft. Because his sample size is so low, he's a great shooter. That is his selling point. He flashed a lot with the ball in his hands, and that's the biggest question mark. Is because his stats are really good, but it's on such a low sample size that you're not really. I'm not sure I'm buying it. So I'm really interested to see where scouts have him. For me personally, he is my number 4 for the Sixers.
Wow.
Yeah, he's my number 4. Just in terms of they could mold him. They could absolutely mold him. He's a great fit next to Tyrese. I'm really high on this kid just for the fact that at number 28, my philosophy has always been get the guy with the highest ceiling, get the guy that he clearly fits. It's, for me, a no-brainer.
And that makes that reminds me of something Mike Levin said. I'm not sure if he said it with you or on the Ricky, which, by the way, everyone go check out. Dives, my man over here, had Mike Levin on the pod, which it was a great interview. I'm not sure if he said it with you, but he was saying, we have to go find our Michael Porter Jr. Late in the draft, go take our home run swing. And that Josh Primo is that guy, I think. If we're saying who that guy is that we've talked about, that would be Josh Primo. That's your home run swing. That's your, maybe even put him in the G League or maybe even put him on the bench and just let him develop and hope in 2 years you just hatched a 3-and-D, 20-year-old cost-controlled guy that you can just plug right in with Joel and whoever you got at that point. So I understand, the optimism around Josh Primo. I know Thiago really likes him. He thinks he could. Right. He thinks he could go in the back end of the lottery.
If I were just from our side conversations, no spoiler warnings here. Yeah, there's spoiler warnings. I would say it's Quentin Grimes and that guy right there for Thiago in the first round for the Sixers.
Those are his guys. For me, it's if you had to narrow it down, it'd be Cam Thomas and Jared Butler. Those are my guys. And for you, it's Trey Murphy. Who's your number 2?
It is.
I'm making you remember.
No. Because I'm not lying. It depends on the board. Because
for sure.
There are guys that I don't expect there to be for the Sixers at number 28, and there are guys that I love at number 28 that are probably there. But if I had to say right now, it would be Trey Murphy and Bones.
So that's 6 different guys. That's our 2 guys for all 3 of us. That's pretty funny.
Trey Man's on that list if he's there.
He's right behind. Yeah, he's right behind for me too. So let me just round it out. That's really those guys you mentioned. Beyond that, I'm not going to get too excited about any of these guys if they're the Sixers pick. I think that there's 25 first-round talents in the draft class. I think those 25 are a legitimate first-round. Those are a top 30. I feel like usually I have to. I have 36 guys I want to put in the top 30, and I have to narrow it down. I have to take 6 out. This year, it wasn't like that. I felt like I had to prod and pull to kind of get second-rounders into this back end of 26 to 30. Maybe that's because I didn't like the international guys. I didn't like the big men. But some of these guys are big men. At number 26, I have JT Thor. I know Dibes is a big fan of that name. As a fellow comic book guy. No? You're not a Thor guy?
Thor, yes.
Yeah. I was just talking about the God of Thunder, but
I love Thor. I love me some Thor. Sustenance.
But yeah, JT Thor, he's an exciting guy. 6'9", 7'3" wingspan. So I think he's probably a 4. I do think he can play some stretch 5. And you look at him, he gets to the line a lot. He shoots a lot of threes. He's a tantalizing player. 2.5 blocks per 40, 1.5 steals per 40, 16 points per game per 40, and 9 rebounds per 40. There's a lot of games where he disappeared. There's a lot of games where it felt like he got bullied down low because he's such he has such a skinny frame. I understand all the the knocks against him, but you see a guy that's that big, that can move like that has that wingspan. I understand that it's tantalizing. I said I don't really think he's a first round talent. I have him number 26, and I just said I think there's 25 first round talents. But outside of that top 25, he's the guy that I look at, and if you squint hard enough, I can see the vision. I can see why people are excited. I mean, that's an incredible defensive play right there against a good Arkansas team. Yeah. There's flashes of brilliance with this kid on both sides of the floor, and then there's lapses of stupidity, to be quite honest. Like, he doesn't seem like a very smart basketball player to me, but the athleticism is clearly there. I like the jumper. I really think that jumper is smooth, and he shot it pretty well. He shot it at a high clip. But when you can see a guy that's that big do transition stuff like that, I get why certain teams are enamored, and I would not be surprised if this is a guy that the Sixers would be looking into.
Yeah, JT Thor didn't make. Oh no, he was on my bubble for my top 5 posts, so he's right outside of the. I had a top 5 and a top 5 on the bubble, so he's in my top 10. You nailed it, Mark. Like, this guy flashes some really ridiculous skills and just screams Pascal Siakam to me. And you see him read the passing lane, get in there and run the court, and there are a lot of things there like that. Like, there are a lot of things that you talk about his athleticism, his hips, and he's fluid, and it's definitely a guy to look out for. But like you said, like, this guy just disappears for lapses. Why didn't he dominate more? So there are just as many question marks as answers.
For sure. And then my next guy here is Isaiah Jackson out of Kentucky. He's a guy who's probably a bit more, we know what he is going to be. He's going to be a rim-running, rebounding, shot-blocking big. He actually blocked 5 shots per 40. So that's a whole lot of block shots, the most in this class by far. Evan Mobley would be next at 3.5. So Isaiah Jackson's not a guy I'm necessarily high on. I don't think, I think there's he's got a hard cap to what he can be with his skill set, in my opinion. I think Mitchell Robinson is probably his upside, and I think that's probably where he's going to get drafted. I think he's probably going to get drafted by the Knicks, and they're just going to have 2 Mitchell Robinsons on their roster, which is interesting. You can't play them together. But, a 6'10 guy, 7'2 wingspan, blocks a ton of shots, best rebounder in the class, best shot blocker in the class. So I get that there are things there. I don't think that there's anything exciting about this guy's game outside of the fact that he rebounds, blocks shots, and gets to the line, which maybe that's enough. Maybe that's enough to get him there. It seems like he's rising hard in this draft class. It seems like he's going to end up being maybe even a top 20 pick. But he's a guy that, I see what he's going to be, and I'm just not as excited as others.
I have nothing to add.
All right, I got you. At number 28, I have Kai Jones out of Texas. He had 15.5 points per game per 40, 8 rebounds per 40, 1 assist, 1.5 steals, and 1 block. So he's kind of like a jack of all trades big. Like, he didn't shoot it that much. He shot 2.2 threes per 40, but he played a little defense. He defended the rim a little bit. He shot threes a little bit. He's just not great at anything, but he's not bad at anything either, really. That's I haven't looked into these bigs as much as the top 25, but that's my read on Kai Jones. Just, kind of pretty good at everything. I don't know. That's my personal opinion. And then at number 29, I have Herb Jones. So back-to-back, keeping up with the Jones here. Herb Jones, I believe that's a guy you covered, if not today, yesterday?
No, we haven't. No, we haven't done it yet.
You did the highlight reel. Maybe that's what I saw. Yeah,
a lot of buckets at the rim. That's kind of a negative for me. But clearly his calling card is defense and defensive versatility. To me, that screams second round pick. He's not in my first round radar at all for me.
Yeah, it was really hard for me to stretch this out to 30. I was even thinking about guys like Joe. Joe Wieskamp, Matthew Hurt here for the 30th pick, but I ended up staying away from those guys. And I just I threw Greg Brown on there because it's easy to see what he's able to do well. He's just a monster. I'm gonna let you have any thoughts on Greg Brown? I'm actually not sure where you stand on him.
I like Greg Brown. I'm actually happy to see him on your first round big board because he's definitely an intriguing player. That the skill set is 100% there. I see him dominating the G League next season 100%. He's going to be a fun watch, fun cover for people that like the G League, the nerds like myself. So I'm definitely – I could see him in the second round, but I respect that you had him here because I do think there's something there with Greg Brown.
Yeah, just a good rebounder, good shot blocker, and willing to shoot threes. He shot a ton of them, and almost to the point where you're probably shoot less of them. But he doesn't have the frame of necessarily get down low and back you up. So I get that why he wants to shoot a lot of threes. But when you're able to rebound that well and shot block that well, it definitely it gets you on my radar. But a lot like a guy I forget who we were talking about, JT Thor. A lot like him. He has moments where it's like, have you played basketball before? Like he has moments where it is definitely worrisome. But that rounds out my top 30. I'll tweet it out in relation, or I'll quote tweet this stream and tweet it out. But that's my top 30. Like I said, I think that there's 9 guys that I'd be really happy with the Sixers drafting. So that's I think who knows if we're going to make that 28th pick. But I have a top 10. I have JRE to round out my Sixers big board top 10, but I wouldn't necessarily love taking him in the first round. So that top 9 is really, and I'm pretty sure that at least 2 of Cam Thomas, Jared Butler, I would assume Trey Mann, Quentin Grimes, Jaden Springer, Bones Highland, Miles McBride, Trey Murphy. I'm sure 2 of them will be there at 28. That's my prediction. So, and I think one of them will be the pick because me and Daryl Morey are simpatico right here after the Tyrese Maxey pick last year.
It's going to be wild because imagine all those guys are available at 28 and we pick someone completely off the board that you never heard of. And it's like, all right, we know it's going elsewhere. We know it's going somewhere else. So it's going to be a fun night. Thursday night can't come here soon enough.
Yeah, for sure. I can't wait. And just before, there will be some comments like, oh, you forgot this guy. You forgot this guy. We talked about Giddey earlier on. I'm not a big Josh Giddey guy. Alperen Sengun, not a big Alperen Sengun guy. Sharif Cooper. If you noticed my board, I'm not liking point guards who can't shoot. Elfrid Payton scares me. Guys like Elfrid Payton and that player mold is not something that I really want. Unless you're like a John Morant level athlete. That's not a point guard type that I like. So Sharif Cooper was off my board. And then Josh Christopher, one last point I want to make before we get out of here. What's up?
I like Josh Christopher. Yep.
You like him? Okay. So I see the vision with Josh Christopher. He's a guy I think he probably projects as a 6-man. I think he's like a heat him up volume scorer. I have a bit of a problem when I think people are kind of throwing him and Cam Thomas in the same conversation as, these chucker high volume scorers. Because I think they're going to go in the same range. It looks like Cam Thomas is going to go in the 20s. And it looks like Josh Christopher could go in the first round too. So I think there's a wide gap between where those guys are at offensively. And Cam Thomas gets to the line at such a higher clip than a guy like Josh Christopher and shoots way more threes than a guy like Josh Christopher, who shoots a bit too many mid-rangers for my liking and doesn't get to the line enough for a guy who shoots as many two-pointers as he does. So that would be why I didn't have Josh Christopher on the board. Those are the guys that come to mind that I didn't include on my top 30 that people will be yelling and screaming about. But I just don't see those guys as someone who's going to contribute in the NBA in the near future.
All right, so number 28, gun to your head, pop quiz, hot shot. Who's your guy?
My guy with this shirt is Cam Thomas. Put that man on our team and just let's get the free throw line. Him and Joel Embiid, let's get like 30 free throws a game between those two guys. That would be that's my dream. And then that Jared Butler, Trey Mann, Io group is right after that. If Cam Thomas is gone, it looks like Cam Thomas is going to be gone. So I would say my realistic dream is starting to be, Jared Butler, I would say, because I really don't think Cam Thomas will be there. But like I said before, there's 9 guys I'd be fine with, and I really do think it will be Quentin Grimes. I think Quentin Grimes is going to be the pick if we keep it.
All right, man. Let's wrap it up. Where can we find you, man? What do you got going on?
You can find me at Mark Henry Jr. _ and you can find me at Tough Cover Pod. I'll be starting a podcast, I believe. It's either Tuesday or Wednesday. Stay tuned to my Twitter with Shane. I know we were going to do Thursday, and he was like, wait, it's the NBA draft on Thursday. I was like, oh, my God. So I for some reason I had it in my head as like Friday or Saturday. I don't know what was going on, but we were going to start it on Thursday. We're going to start it on Wednesday or Tuesday now. It's called Chalk Talk with me and Shane, and that's going to be about the Eagles and the NFL. And after this NBA draft, my brain is full on football mode. So that's what I'll be focusing on my Twitter and on my podcasts.
You and me, brother. You and me. I'm excited. I've had that football itch like a week or two ago. Like
me too.
For some reason, as brutal as that season was a year ago, like it just crept up. It crept up on me, and I'm just like, I'm ready. I'm really excited. So, guys, make sure everybody follows Mark on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. _ You can follow his podcast, Tough Cover Podcast, on Twitter, everywhere. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you love the Sixers, give this video a like. Please be sure to comment. Smash that subscribe button for everything NBA draft. We'll be here Thursday night live reacting to all the picks. It's going to be a ton of fun, as we do every single year. If there's someone that you've never heard of or someone you have heard of, we've probably done a scouting report on them for the Sixers. So, lock it down here at the Painted Lines. For Mark, for myself, thanks for watching, guys. Stay awesome.
Sixers win it! Wow!
Oh, man. Embiid just posterized Russell Westbrook.